sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor early in the morning?
I'm Paul Bennett here in Millbridge, Maine. We're located along Maine's Bold Coast, up near the U.S.-Canadian border. Today's video is all about making mainframes. The 18-foot sailboat that I'm in the process of building is a hard chine design with a flat bottom. It requires that the mainframes be built before you start assembling the boat. I still have maybe, I think, another 4 frames to build before I get to the point where I can start bringing them out back. But it's moving right along. This video will show you how to do it. Now the nice thing about this is that there are many different designs of boats similar in fashion to this flat bottom hard chine. Anything from little open skiffs and dinghies to larger boats of this nature. They all use this method, so maybe watch what I'm doing. You can pick up a few tips. When you start building your own boat, you can use a lot of what I'm doing here to build your frames. And I started out using this piece of plywood. I use that as a big drawing board. I hope you get something from it. Use it as a tutorial. I don't know if this will appear obvious or not. If it's not obvious, if you've never built a boat before, in order to lay out the frames, I'm going to lay them all out full size, and I'm going to draw them full size first. So I'm going to lay them out, draw the lines in on this piece of plywood. I'm using this as a drawing board. I'm using this edge as a baseline to take all my measurements from. And right now I'm going to find the center line. It's an 8-foot sheet of plywood, so it's 4 feet. Close enough. I'll use that as a reference point for the center line. I'm using this base as a reference for the baseline. So I'll just draw that on there. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I can take the measurements off my drawing and I can duplicate those measurements full size and draw all the parts into place on this drawing board. And then I can take the measurements from the full size. I can make sure everything fits, everything is right. If I made a mistake, it's going to look kind of weird, so I want to see that first before I commit to cutting wood. And then I can take my pieces of wood and I can cut the proper angles and the proper lengths, and I can lay them out right on top of the drawing, and they should line up perfectly. If they do that, I can then go ahead and I can glue and screw them up and then let the glue set and take them off. Wherever there's glue, I can put a little wax paper or something underneath so the frame won't stick to this plywood drawing surface. And that's how I'm going to make all of my mainframes. Once the mainframe is laid out, the glue cures, I'll also be adding some plywood gussets wherever there's a joint, and that'll help strengthen the mainframe. This is what I'm doing. You want to keep a pencil sharpener handy, because when you're drawing on plywood, your pencil gets dull very quickly and you want to keep a sharp point. That allows for better accuracy. The width at the bottom from the center line on this particular frame, this is number 3, station number 3 on my drawing, and that's near the forward end. I want to come out 2 feet 2 and 11/16, which is only a 16th shot of 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to make a mark here. Grab my tri-square. So this is the bottom edge of this frame on one side. And I'm going to take the exact same measurement, 2 feet 2 and 11/16 on the other side of the center line. Make another mark. Okay, now I've done that, and that gives me the width of the bottom of the frame. And these are my 2 marks. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the height of the frame. And when I lay out the height of the frame, I'll put the line across, parallel with the bottom. And then I can measure out from the center line on each end the width at the top of the frame. And where this is a hard chine boat and the sides are straight, it's very easy. Once that we know these marks, we can just connect the dots and we'll have the shape of the sides and we'll have the angle. So what I've done is I've taken a straight edge and with a couple of 2-inch spring clamps, I clamped them at each end with the edge aligned with the measurement marks I made at each end. So now I can run a parallel line all the way across this drawing board, and this line is parallel with the base of the frame, which I'm using the edge of the plywood, remember, as a baseline. That's also the bottom edge of the frame. In this line I'm drawing represents the top of the frame, at least where the main deck is. And now that I have that line, I can take the half-breadth measurements and find out how far out the top of the frame will go, the outer edge, the beam. This is where the shear is. That is 2 feet 7 3/16 one way and the same measurement the other way. So at this point I can remove the straight edge, 2 7 3/16. So I got 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Make the same mark over here, 31 3/16. It doesn't hurt to double check yourself a couple of times because it's real easy to get sidetracked. And that's where mistakes are made. Okay, so I've got those 2 marks right here. I already measured out how far out I need to go on the bottom. So I get a straight edge, and I can connect those 2 marks both up at the shear and down at the chine. The chine is down at the bottom of the frame. It's where the side meets the bottom. That's the chine. The shear is up here where the side meets the top of the frame. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up those 2 marks best I can, and I'll draw a line here joining them. And I don't know if the camera will pick this up or not, but the line I just drew now is the side of the frame. That means that when all these frames are in place, the skin of the vessel, the plywood outer skin or sheathing, is going to go right up against these sides. That'll be the side of the boat. So we're going to do this at the same point. On the other side, opposite side, I'm going to line it up. Now I have the other side drawn in as well. When you look at it, you know, if there are other marks and you made a mistake because there was another pencil mark somewhere, it's going to be fairly evident. So you can stand back and you look at it, you can see that it's symmetrical. I'm standing right at the center line. It's about right. Doesn't hurt to double check your measurements. Sometimes you can make little notes. That helps. But I have the outline, the basic outline of the frame. And at this point, I'm going to start drawing in the actual components. Now I know the sides of the frame happen to be 2.5 inches wide. So what I can do here is I can measure, I'll measure 2.5 inches. Up here, somewhere down here, I'll measure 2.5 inches across. And now I can take my straight edge. Let's see, there's a sharper point here. Draw a parallel line. This shows the width of the board I'm going to use to make up this side of the main frame. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then, when I'm finished with that, I'm going to measure up from the bottom the width of the bottom section of this mainframe, which happens to be 3.5 inches. And once again, I'll take a straight edge and I will draw a parallel line, and that will show me that actual board. Once these are all drawn out, all I have to do now is start cutting wood, and I can take a bevel gauge to get the angle and set up my saw for cutting the proper angles on the edges of these boards, and then they should all fit together exactly right on top, superimposed on top of the parts that I just drew. So I'll have a mainframe sitting right on top of my drawing. The drawing represents the mainframe. It's drawn up full size. I'm going to have pieces of wood on top of it that will be the mainframe once they're all glued and screwed together. And then they'll have gussets added. I have a mainframe. I will do a cross piece right at the level where it needs to be to put it at the proper height on the strongback so that they're all in the proper height and aligned properly. You'll see that as we get to it. What I have here is some white primer. Nothing special. It's just some product by Zinsser, bin 123 primer. It's a water-based primer. It doesn't really matter. After 2, sometimes you stretch it to 3 frames laid out on the plywood here as a drawing board. The lines start getting, all over the place on top of each other, and it begins to get confusing. And so what I do is after every 2 or 3 main frames, I'll take some primer. I'm just painting over the lines that I had drawn. That gives me a new surface to work off of. So when this dries, I won't be looking at these lines. So it won't be so confusing. Because when you get too many lines on here, after you do a couple of 2 or 3 frames, it starts getting so complicated it's very easy to make mistakes.
Watch